paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Bryant, and welcome to the Nick Bryant Podcast. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that we had put up an activist website demanding justice for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. The website will be live within a week, and it will provide software so that users of the website can directly email their congressmen and congresswomen in Washington, D.C. Today's podcast is entitled Pedophilia, Lies, and Blackmail, and it documents the Washington, D.C. side of the Franklin scandal from the perspective of Henry Vinson, who ran a gay escort service in D.C. in the 1980s. He unfortunately intersected with Craig Spence and Lawrence King, the two primary pimps of the Franklin network. I conducted the interview you will be listening to for the Franklin scandal. Over the years, I've gotten to know Henry very well, and we've become friends. He and I collaborated on his autobiography, Confessions of a DC Madam, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. Henry is a very good guy and an extremely unlikely person to get mixed up with the sociopaths running around the Capitol. Henry is a funeral director who grew up in remote West Virginia, and he sought his mortuary fortunes in Washington, D.C. He was a very naive kid, and he's the last person in the world that you would think would run a gay escort agency. Henry grew up in a very religious household in a very remote part of West Virginia. In Washington, D.C., Henry met other gay funeral directors, and they would go to a bar after work, which was a gay version of the Chippendales. And Henry befriended one of the dancers, and they were out for dinner one night, and the dancer told him that someone was selling an escort service for $10,000. And Henry, prior to that point, I don't even think he'd had a speeding ticket. But with the impetuousness of youth, he bought the escort service. And Henry has an amazing marketing ingenuity. So after he bought the escort service, he started to look up escort services in the yellow pages. And escort services are generally fly-by-night operations that don't pay their phone bills. So Henry dialed up a number of escort services and they didn't pay their phone bills. So he contacted the phone company and he said that he would pay for the arrears if the phone company gave him that number. So overnight, almost literally overnight, Henry's escort service started to grow exponentially. And he was still a funeral director while operating this escort service. Henry's life was going along swimmingly until one fateful day when he received a call from Craig Spence. Spence spent up to $25,000 a month on escorts from Henry's service. But little did Henry know that once he started dealing with Spence, he had made a Faustian pact. Henry quickly realized that he was over his head because Spence was running a CIA blackmail honey trap. Henry had to be at the beck and call of sociopaths like Craig Spence and Lawrence King, and he had nowhere to turn. His escort service had become a Frankenstein that he had no control over. Henry became the man who knew too much, and the feds eventually took him down. The feds indicted Henry on a 43-count RICO indictment, which is generally used to take down the mafia. And Henry was staring at 300 years in prison. His attorney, Greta Van Susteren, sold him out, and Henry took a plea deal. He would keep his mouth shut and do 5 years in prison. Since Henry has gotten out of prison, he's become a very successful businessman. He exemplifies the resiliency of the human spirit and shows that it's tough to keep a good man down. The interview you are about to hear is extremely shocking, and it sheds light on the cesspool that has become our government.
Okay, I'm interviewing Henry Vinson. It's December 4th, approximately 6:12. Henry?
Yes.
And you ran an escort service in the late 80s, early 90s in Washington, D.C.?
Correct.
And now, you came into contact with two gentlemen named Craig Spence and Larry King.
Correct.
And did you meet King or did you meet Spence first?
I met Spence first.
And how did you meet Craig Spence?
Actually, he started calling, and I would send people over to see him. And he spent lots of money, probably $20,000-$25,000 a month.
And then you met Larry King through Craig Spence?
Yes.
And did he use your services too?
Yes.
Now, did King, did he require any certain type of escort? Did he have a preference for younger escorts?
Yes, he did. I always wanted someone that looked very boyish, very young.
Was there, did he ever want you to procure minors for him?
Oh, he'd ask many, many times, but I never did. There was never anyone under age 18 that I dealt with. Some of them appeared younger, but they were never under 18.
And you had heard about King actually flying in children from the heartland?
Yes. Craig Spence had mentioned that they had loaned people in, and they were flying younger people in, and they were available.
And who did they make these minors available to?
They were available to various politicians in Washington, D.C.
And did you ever meet any of these politicians?
No, I didn't.
No?
I used to just hear the talk from Craig Spence.
And now, King and Spence, they had a CIA affiliation. How did you know about that?
Well, Craig Spence basically told everything that he knew, but he would have me come up to the house. And it turns out there were secret recording devices and secret videotapes up there, and apparently he was blackmailing people in his house. So he would